Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for what will be my concluding part of this demonstration of a single turn from Fire in the Sky, the Great Pacific War. I'm really sorry for my camera cutting out at a particularly interesting moment of the battle in the last game. So as it was going, I was checking the damage on the US carriers, the two groups, the Saratoga and Enterprise Group and the Yorktown and Lexington Group. I'm sorry to say that I failed both roles dismally. So, in what's proved to be an absolutely hideous reverse midway, in the sort of very early spring of 1942, the US Navy has suffered a rather horrific defeat where they have not made a dent on the Japanese forces opposing them, or at least not a significant one, and they have effectively been reduced to just a rump of surface task forces. So this is a really awful result for them. So with the air combat phase over, which would have been the next step in this business, I returned the task forces to the carrier task forces box. And normally we would then proceed to the surface combat phase, but neither side has any bombardment task forces, and these would be the ones that would engage in surface combat for sea control. But because this was intended to be a carrier raid on Rabaul, which has gone hideously wrong, as you've seen. Oh dear, sorry US Navy. My battle charge was really not good, and my strategic planning just awful. So there is no surface combat phase, and obviously again there's no ground combat because no one's brought any invasion forces with them. So that ends the combat. That was a truly horrific turn. So what happens next is that we get rid of the battle board and its associated pieces, and the contending naval units are returned to the hex the battle was fought in, and the Japanese air units are replaced where they were. So with that over, we now have the return to base phase. Now the only Allied units that are away from home, as it were, are the remnants of the two US naval task forces. So they return to the US home base, which is the West Coast bases, all the way up here. And they do so safely. They remain on their operational side. And at the beginning of the next turn, they will, if they wish, be able to free transfer back to Pearl Harbor. Of course, as I say, no other Allied aircraft or naval units deployed this turn, so it was only those US Navy ships that have to go home. Oh, and of course the Japanese, having reacted, they too need to go all the way home. So they will return to port. I think given that this is Kido Butai, the Japanese will want to keep them in a fairly centralized place vis-a-vis the rest of the fleet, so they can return to Kure, and I'll stick them on their operational side because they reacted this turn. And then, of course, at the beginning of the next turn, they'll be fresh for operations again. So now it is the second deployment. The Allies have quite a few transport points available, and although they've suffered a horrific defeat, I mean, this is really bad news for them because the loss of virtually all the Allied carriers on the board, save HMS Hermes, means that the Japanese have a very free run now to do whatever they like. As I said in the previous video, I would not normally have been that reckless in a game like this, but I realized I was most of the way through the demonstration, and because I'd played the Dutch so cautiously, there was a very real danger that we'd get to the end of this without me showing you a sea battle. So there we go, there is your sea battle, and there's a warning to all of you when you're playing the Allied side. Don't try odds with the Imperial Navy too early in the war. There's a time and a place for it, and off the waters of Rabaul in, January, February, March 1942 was really not the right time for it. It is a pity that Kido Butai was ready to react and take the opportunity, but there we go. At least you got a demonstration of a rather epic carrier battle. So what do the Allies want to do by way of second deployment? Well, let's have a look at the British. Now, the British have some choices. They've got some air units there that they could shift round. One mistake the Japanese made was not to have naval units in close proximity to interfere with British movement during the operational phases. But during the deployment phase, that's less of a problem. So, this being the second deployment phase, they can't one hex deploy. But the British can spend, let's see, they've got 2 transport points. And these aircraft did not move operationally. So 1, 2, 3, 4. The British are able to send them by sea transport to Calcutta. Now, why not to Rangoon? Well, they could send them to Rangoon, but the problem is they have... Oh, no, they could not send them to Rangoon. I lie, because there is an enemy presence there. But even if there was not, it's very risky placing your aircraft just a bit too forward with major enemy ground units in the vicinity. Far better to have them in a fallback supporting position. And the other consideration for the British is that the loss of Rangoon would not be great, but the loss of Calcutta would be far worse and would probably mean the loss of the game. So the British have spent the last of their transport points moving aerial reinforcements towards the Burma theatre. Now, what about the United States? To be perfectly honest, there's not a lot they can really meaningfully do, I don't think. They really should keep their naval units at Pearl Harbor with a view to concentrating some fresh strength next turn. It is tempting to redistribute their aircraft down here, but there's not that much purpose to it, because despite their weakness, all of these represent avenues that they have to guard to prevent Japanese expansion. They really have to play a tight game. If this game had gone on, the Allies would have to play a very tight, error-free game in order to prevent the Japanese from winning, because the victory points, of course, stand at 13. So the Japanese are doing well, and the Allies don't want them to get too close to that magic number of 20 victory points. So the United States will perhaps hold off for the moment. They haven't forgotten that they have a very capable ground unit in the form of the 1st Marine Division at Pearl Harbor, but it would be foolhardy to throw in an amphibious assault when they've got nothing resembling air or carrier superiority anywhere in the theatre. And of course, because of the events of earlier in the turn, reinforcing the Philippines in any meaningful sense is just a pipe dream now. And of course, it is a bit tempting to try and help the Dutch, but really they're too far away. They're impossible to supply now that Singapore has fallen, and really they're just going to wither on the vine until the Japanese come to finish them off. So it's not looking great. So the Allies will end there with the second deployment phase, and that then is the end phase. Any victory points they might have earned would be finalized on the game tracker this turn, but as nothing changed, it remains at 13. And that is the completion of the January to March 1942 game turn. So I hope that that's been of use and interest as always. I've tried my best to explain and cover every step of the game turn as I've played my way through it. I believe I said in the comments to the first video of this playthrough that every now and then I've done suboptimal moves, but that's only been in order to demonstrate how the systems of this game work. And I suppose you could say I've ended on an enormously suboptimal move by authorizing that crazy raid on Rabaul. That was really not a good idea, but at least it showed you a naval battle, so there we go. So I'll stop it there, and I will be returning to this game again to offer my final thoughts on it in the next video. But before I go, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you, as always, for following this series. Really great to hear that so many of you have got this game and enjoy it. This will always be one of my favourites for reasons that I will revisit in the next video. But your company, as always, is massively appreciated. To all of my veterans who stuck with me through game after game and thick and thin, a huge hello to all of you. It's really good to see you guys, and thank you for your ongoing support and company. A huge hello to anyone who's very recently joined us. If this is your first video on the channel, welcome. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do check out all the other Fire in the Sky videos I have done, and the one or two that I may do in the future. If it's wargaming that's in general that's brought you here, then by all means do have a browse. I hope you find something on the channel that you like. And in any case, I look forward to seeing you all in my next video. And thank you as always for tuning in. Bye.